just who is the Burger Baron anyway? Well, let's shed some light on that whole mystery by inviting Omar Mouellam to join us here on CKUA Thoroughfare on this Wednesday afternoon. Omar Mouellam's film is called The Lebanese Burger Mafia. It's a full-length documentary, and it's all set to unspool debut, in fact, at Hot Docs Documentary Film Festival on May 3rd. That's in Toronto. Omar makes his home in Edmonton, and I caught him at his home office. Thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on CKUA again.
Congratulations on your film being selected for Hot Docs Festival in Toronto this year.
Thank you.
To contextualize just a bit, can you tell me what the Lebanese Burger Mafia is all about?
Well, the Lebanese Burger Mafia is about a little unknown fact about a very well-known institution in Alberta called the Burger Baron. Most Albertans know it as this sort of, this long-standing burger chain that no one really knows why it's still around, how it still exists. Seems to still just exist and prosper in small towns with a few locations left in Edmonton. But people don't give it too much thought beyond that. But my parents actually owned a Burger Baron in High Prairie, and it's been a big mystery for me all my life. And one of the earliest things that I noticed about it is that all the owners, like my parents, were Lebanese immigrants. Mm-hmm. And that kind of got stuck in my head. I wondered, how did that happen? Why is it that way? And also, does that explain maybe why no two Burger Barons are the same, why they're all so fiercely independent, different menus, different logos, different brands? My people are famously very independent. They're very independent, and they're known for their disagreements. And you can look at the Lebanese Civil War for an extreme version of that, or you could look at Burger Baron for, a less extreme and more low stakes and humorous version of that.
And actually, it's funny you bring up the war in Lebanon as kind of being a precipitant in having Burger Baron reinvent itself.
Yeah, that's right. So Burger Baron's history actually is that it was not invented by Lebanese immigrants. It was invented by an immigrant, American immigrants, Irish-American immigrants, in 1957. And it was an American entrepreneur named Jack McDonald and his brothers who started it. And they were, he mainly was trying to basically create the McDonald's of the North. And it was a growing concern in Canada, Burger Baron was, for about 4 years. It expanded to about 30 locations, but then it kind of collapsed under the weight of its rapid expansion and went bankrupt in 1961. And as far as I can tell, the intellectual property was never properly passed down. And so it created an opening for people to just kind of get in there and do what they wanted with it. Then came one Lebanese immigrant named 𝗪𝗏, and he sort of taught it to his brothers and his relatives. And then where it really took off, like you said, is the Civil War. So if you look at the most prosperous years for the Burger Baron, it's 1976 to the early 90s, which overlaps perfectly with the Lebanese Civil War. And that's when you had all these refugees and immigrants coming to Canada. They didn't have a lot of opportunities. Some of them were highly educated. I mean, one in particular, 𝗵𝗵𝗆 from Wetaskiwin, he was an airline pilot. He flew for Middle East Airlines. And he came here and he wasn't able to find work. So what did he do? He followed in his cousin's footsteps. He opened a Burger Baron. And that's basically the story of my family and many, many, many more families, dozens of families.
And were you compelled to tell this story mostly because of your personal connection to Burger Baron? Or you love the mushroom burger? What piqued your interest initially?
Yeah, I mean, it is something very personal to me. I also, I sort of have one foot in, one foot out. I was never going to inherit my family's business. I just didn't have the chops or the patience. I didn't show any of that, potential as a restaurateur. And I went the path of journalism and filmmaking. So I was able to kind of step back and look at it a little bit more objectively and ask the journalistic questions that no one had asked before. At the same time, I mean, I owe so much of my life to the success of the Burger Baron. and the loyalty of the Alberta customers to that place. And so I have a real fondness for it. And as it starts to, sort of disappear, you see a lot of Burger Barons closing in the last 10 years, about a third of them, actually. I can't help but feel a little bit wistful and nostalgic.
It's a feisty chain that has managed to survive. So it is sad, I think, for lots of folks who grew up on the Burger Barons. Let's talk about movie making for a second, because I know you're a published author and you've done some amazing journalism. You've also written a book that has received some significant praise, Praying to the West. And filmmaking is a totally different animal. What's the most significant thing that you learned throughout the making of the Lebanese Burger Mafia?
My education is actually in film. So making documentaries is actually kind of a return to my roots as a storyteller. But one thing I've always just loved about film is the ability to tell stories in more than just words, and just the layers and of ways that you can tell those stories. You can do it obviously with interviews, but visually, with sound, with clever and strategic transitions and cuts. And one of the other things that I learned is that, just how important it is to really have your subjects trust, because interviewing someone for a film, it's a bigger investment of their time and space and energy. You're bringing a whole crew. And the way that we did that is I hired an all Lebanese crew. And so having these sons of Lebanese immigrants and immigrants themselves there, we were really able to get our subjects, we got them pretty comfortable. And we got them to sometimes open up about, some of the conflicts in their business and with other barons, but also open up about some of the deeper stuff, their escape from war, the human experience and some of the trauma that they experienced as refugees in Canada. I think that's something that would be a lot more difficult as just an individual journalist.
Yeah, there's so much more to the Lebanese Burger Mafia than simply, the ingredients, the secret sauce and the mushroom burger. And there's a lot of levity in it, but there's also sort of a deeper core, a deeper kernel, as it were. Well, thank you for bringing the film to bear, and we look forward to the big debut, the premiere in Edmonton when it finally lands in the next little bit. And it's been a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you, Tony. It's been a pleasure.
Based on the popular short film The Last Baron, The Lebanese Burger Mafia is a crowd-funded feature documentary about Burger Baron. A pleasure to chat with Omar Mouellam, the writer and director of this film. It has its world premiere at Hot Docs May 3rd.